Hi everybody. I'm going to actually be doing a little bit of information on a 1971 Suzuki T500. This is actually our race motor that we built for sidecar racing last year. We had quite a few hiccups last year. We did 5 races last year, and at the end of the year, down at Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama, we had this mishap. So, with a destroyed piston, we're not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure why this happened. What I can tell you is when it came out, it had no oil in it. Everything in it just seemed to be bone dry. And one of the problems you have with a Suzuki T500 is the oil injection system is not easy to be removed. On a Yamaha, I actually normally even just keep the pumps in place, but in a Yamaha, you basically just remove the pump, blank it off, you're good to go. Put oil in the gas, you're good. So a Suzuki T500, it has, strangely, it actually has the central bearings, which I'll show you in a minute, actually get lubricated by gear oil. There's actually a hole that slings it up through. You have your central main bearing with 2 seals on it. And then the outer 2 bearings actually have injection holes here. The injector would go here, and then there's lines. And it's the craziest thing, because there's this nest of lines. It's only 4, but it looks really messy. That there's 2 for the cylinders that go right up through the cylinder to lubricate. Of course, only on the rear side of it, which is strange, only on the intake side. And then the outer bearings get lubricated through 2-stroke oil. So we didn't really like that idea, but we wanted to get out on the track first thing last year. So we went with the oil injection. It never seemed quite right. So sometimes one of the cylinders wouldn't have any smoke coming out. Sometimes the other one wouldn't. We didn't particularly care for it, but we had no choice. It was either that or don't go racing, you know. So we did what we could to get out there, even though we didn't like it. Well, we had the failure. Again, don't exactly know why, but so I did. We actually had Ed Toomey, and he did a good job on it. We had him rebuild the crank. It's a massive boat anchor of a thing for a 500. I mean, this thing is it's massive to hold, and but we had the drive side was the one that failed. So this rod, I mean, it had we actually rode it back with this piston. It was still actually attached with pieces just going everywhere. So the whole motor had to be torn apart. There was bits of piston like in the eye of the rod. So we couldn't, you know, to be safe with an engine, to be reliable, there's no way we could run the crank, even though we just had it rebuilt. So I actually popped off this one wheel, took the rod off, checked it all out. I put the rod on a surface plate. It was not bent. I thought it actually looked a little bent, but it's not. There was no scoring on any of the rollers, nothing on the cage. Everything seemed good. So we decided, because ultimately we're going to do a conversion. I'm going to put KTM rods in it. We're going to ditch. We're going to go oil and jet, or we're going to go premix for the whole thing. But this rod did look good. We're going to get one more season out of it before we do a complete redesign of it. So this is back together. I was a little concerned getting this wheel back on. It's 24 millimeters. It's strange. They're super long rods. I believe they're 136 or 137. I forget. 18 mil wrist pin, 24 mil big end pin. So it's not really that big. But the big end bearing is 24 by 30. That's 24 by 30, which is normal. But it's 22 mil wide, so it's a super wide bearing. So that's going to prove to be a problem. But there's a KTM rod that is 136, I believe. So I'm going to try. I may have to run longer, wider shims in there, so it can't, so the rod can't go back and forth. But this seems good. We're going to reassemble it. But the one thing we really wanted to do, the other thing that they do, let's see if I have it here. So the strange thing about the T500 is that Suzuki made these crazy bearings, and the bearing itself I mean, this is not a bearing inside of a steel housing. This is the bearing. So it's all one piece. And these are, of course, like not easy to find. So what I'm ultimately going to do is remachine this housing out of aluminum. Of course, I'll need to do the O-ring groove. I'll need to do the locating groove, the locating pin, the circlip groove, the seal housing, and then I'm going to machine a hole, like a interference fit, so I can heat it up and put it looks like a 6305 bearing is going to fit in there. So I'm going to remachine the whole thing so it'll have replaceable bearings. So when you need to replace a bearing, your shell's going to be fine. Just remove the damn bearing and put it in. You know, it's crazy that they did what they did. But so we really wanted to get rid of this oil injection because we feel like that may have caused part of the problem. We also could have just had a piston failure. These are the cruise and image pistons. And actually, maybe I'll do another video on that. But there's a whole ring peg issue with those. And this doesn't have that problem. It depends on how they make the piston. We'll do that in another video. So I was a little concerned. I got this wheel back on, got it trued. Everything's back up, trued, ready to go. And so what I did on this is still crusty. Obviously, it has to be cleaned and everything. So what I had actually done is what I did to make oil injection work, or make premix work, is so the transmission actually slings oil up through this hole to line up on a hole in the crank, and then kind of drains back down through. It's real weird, but the inner seal, the inner bearings are actually lubricated by gear oil being slung through. The outers have those oil injection holes through these tiny pinholes. So what I actually did was I ended up, I drilled holes in the transfer, just like might be on like a Yamaha. So I drilled holes in there and then lined them up with the actual oil holes. And I won't necessarily demonstrate, you'll have to take my word for it, but sure enough, when you pour oil in these holes, they come right out the side, and it comes down through pretty good. There's a seal here that's spaced out, so it's actually able to come in, get slung around, and go into the motor and get pulled up through. So we are now able to ditch the oil injection system, and then we'll run straight premix. So, and then the other thing we're also going to do, at the time, Wiseco did not have any pistons in stock. T500 pistons are also GT750 water buffalo pistons, but the water buffalo uses like 2 lefts and 1 right. This just uses a left and a right. So we didn't have the option for Wiseco when we raced last year. So it's very possible that all we had was a piston failure, that this just cracked up under load. It's possible, but like I say, it was bone dry. So it looked to us kind of like the oil had stopped flowing in that cylinder. We scored the cylinder real bad, you know, so we're redoing all that. There's also a reason that we are using this motor. A lot of people might think, well, why on earth would you use this silly motor? This is not particularly good. Well, in our sidecar class, SC2, there's certain regulations. One of the rules we have for SC2 is you're allowed 500cc piston ported, which is what this is, no reeds. So the only other motor that would be good for that would be an R5, a Yamaha R5, 72, 71 through 73 or whatever. But then you're at a 350cc with running against 750 BMWs and stuff, so you really don't have the power you need. If you add reeds to go RD350, RD400, you bump up a class, and then you're racing against bigger bikes yet. This was the best case, because we are 2-stroke only. This was the best motor we could use in the class. We're not glutton for punishment, intentionally wanting. We don't think this is necessarily the best motor we've ever seen. It fits the bill for the class we're racing in. Another thing which I have to do, which I haven't quite figured out yet, is this. I mean, if you look at this, there's no squish in this. It's just a hemispherical head. I'm going to have to weld all this up and then remachine. The downside, which I'm going to have to figure out, is that this does not fit on my lathe. I have a 10-inch swing, and this extra, it hits. So I'm going to have to call in some friends, call in some favors, and maybe borrow a friend's lathe at another shop. So either that or I'm going to have to weld it up. And then I thought I could do it on a rotary table with a milling machine, which is possible, but seems like a lot more work. But yeah, the head was awful. And then the other thing I'll just mention briefly, again, you probably won't be able to see. The porting's always hard to see here. But it is incredibly primitive porting. You know, I mean, it's just two big A transfers. And, you know, I mean, the whole thing is just, it's really crude, really primitive. Eventually, I don't know when I'm going to find time to do this, but eventually I'm going to machine the cylinders. I'm going to take the sleeves out. I'm just going to machine them out, get custom sleeves made, and then I'm going to actually weld up. Once that's out, I will actually weld up partitions there, and I will make A's, B's, and it looks to me like while it's out, I'll actually have enough gap here that I can actually go up through. I'll go through the A's. So you have A's, you'll have B's, and then I'll swoop up over and end up with a C port on a piston ported, but it won't be like a goofy one with a hole in the piston or anything. It'll actually come up around the cylinder and enter correctly. Two streams meeting. It'll either be two C's or maybe I'll meet them up together and make one big C. But in the end, this will be a whole row of transfer ports at the bottom. And the big part of that too is that transfer area helps cool the piston. When it comes down, that wash of fresh mixture cools the piston crown pretty considerably. So with an air-cooled 500, we need all the cooling we can get. We cannot run liquid-cooled or any of the TR 500 race stuff. That's illegal. So we can do what we can do with this, but it's going to be a long road for sure. So right for now, when I rebuild this, probably do this this next week or so. Once I rebuild this, will be full premix and Wiseco pistons. I'm also making packing plates. Maybe I'll go over port timings with this. Before I do it, I've got to make a 2 mil packing plate, take 2 mil off the top, and then do all of the squish clearances to line it all back up. We'll see how all that goes. So yeah, so that's our sidecar project, and this also has to be done for February. Almost every video I've got is February 18th in Roebling Road down in Georgia. So all this stuff has got to be done. So I got to get back to work. All right, guys.